Hey guys, this is Tyler here. It is May, it's very beautiful here. I'm going to talk about something, and this is something that a lot of us MGTOW guys have experienced, and I think it's one of the reasons why we often, one of our biggest annoyances, and that's the simps all around us that we have to deal with. There's so many problems that these type of guys cause, and they're everywhere now. Often you won't even know who they are. Sometimes have a low profile, other times not. And there's obviously two things that have caused these people to become so prevalent, and this is obviously one of the reasons why there's so many of them today. And of course they have caused many of the modern dating problems that we now deal with. And it's also probably one of the big reasons why a lot of guys go this path. Now, also, when we look at how much in our society, when we look at the tax systems and divorce laws and alimony and child support, a lot of this is tied together. This, I think a lot of it originated from the Anglo-Saxon traditions, and unfortunately, like in the early 20th century and later 19th century, there was a lot of this mentality within the Anglo world, especially from England. The colonial aspect extended all throughout the world, and it was this mindset that we're like the apex predator, and whatever we say, whatever we do, our norms are then should be embraced everywhere. And obviously, so when we look at like the U.S. system of divorce and child support and everything, very similar to England and Canada and Australia. These are very similar systems, and it really goes back to that same issue. And also, of course, when we go back not that many years ago, even in the time of my grandfather, there was really no such thing as a welfare system, even in America. This did not exist. And when we look at this is just, it's crazy. It's astonishing when we look at how big this system has grown to now in the U.S. and how many people rely on this now in some way, especially all these single mothers and all these screwed up households, how prevalent it is. I mean, if we go back, say, to the 1940s and to a degree even the 50s, and certainly the 1930s, this did not exist. This system was not around. And so that meant that there was a lot more importance placed on women making good decisions and also the family would have a lot of input on who they were supposed to be with, who they should be sleeping with, and who, also, of course, marrying and everything. And obviously, too, the whole mindset was that like marriage and this was for life. It wasn't some temporary arrangement and then it ended after 5 or 10 years. It was for life. And if it didn't, often it was the guy that chose doing it. So obviously, times have changed. When we look at like how the this whole system evolved, it very much is kind of based on the same premise, the reason why it stayed. Because when you look at the fact that this system was established at a time when there really wasn't any kind of welfare like we see today, and there wasn't all these tax redistribution programs, the workplace and most of the decent economic opportunities exist only for men. And obviously, too, the world as a whole was just not as safe. And so women really did rely on a guy for protection. But those times aren't around. Unfortunately, what happened is this system never was modified per the times. It just stayed with. So it should have, this whole system should have been like overhauled, probably like in the 1960s or 1970s. But that never happened because political power, obviously. The politicians knew this was very good for them and their bottom line, to buy votes, to buy voters. So when we look at like all this sim problem, one of the biggest byproducts of this is related to what I was just talking about, is that was from all the single mothers. When we look at, say, Gen X or baby boomers up to presently, the rate of single motherhood has just exploded. It's skyrocketed. And this then produces, I think the percentage of same kind of guys that are produced from this is much higher than the rate of these guys produced from normal households. Because there's kind of this victim mindset that is very common within single mother households. It's so prevalent, and guys often then carry this over into relationships, into the women they meet, and some guys continue pushing this mantra. And even the guys that don't have any success with the women, they continue pushing this, thinking that this is what will get them in bed. Many of these, like, we could say women as kind of protests and other gatherings, there's some guys at these things that simply go just so that they can try get into the bed of one of these women that they're attending with. And I guess they think this is some kind of panty dropper, that this woman is going to be like really endeared to them then or something. That's what they feel. But often this doesn't happen, of course. But some of these guys, truly, this is why they go to this stuff. They don't even really support it per se. And I would venture to say that at least 80% of the guys at these things probably are from single parent households and were probably raised primarily by women. Maybe 90%, honestly, because this is usually what you see with these kind of this whole victim narrative. This is often the kind of guys that fall prey to these kind of women. It's the same thing then that extends when we look at like the online dating apps I've spoken about many times before. These guys then are very overly desperate, and they saturate a lot of attention onto these gals. They kiss up to them, and they pay them, they do all sorts of things, not expecting anything in return. And this is one of the major category of guys that has caused massive dating problems, because when we look at like 30 years ago, there was a large segment of women or girls where they didn't really get a lot of attention, honestly, when they were in school, when they were younger. I know personally of family and related to me when these were baby boomers, and when they were in school, these women, they did not hardly get any attention. They literally had to seek out guys. At that time, there were literally, these were gals now that would probably have 20 or 50 different options through an online dating app. They literally had to seek out guys. So there's a segment of females that didn't really even hardly get much attention from these guys. Whereas now, this is not the case. Even these very less desired gals now would be like have many options. And one of the major things related to this is all these simps. It's also interesting, I've noted before, that many of these guys, I think, intentionally go for the gals that are maybe like the 5s and 6s, because they think that these gals will be easier, they'll be nicer, they're not getting hit up as much. And I have a theory that I think some of these like 6s and probably 7s get hit up by more of these guys, at least these kind of guys, than like the 8s and 9s gals. When we look at kind of how the mentality of these guys, this is a very common issue. I actually remember this guy that I worked with back when I was in Chicago at UPS. He was of, I won't say his name, he was of Hispanic background. And this guy was like, he was textbook definition of this, what I'm talking about now. I mean, it was so bad. Like, what actually ended up happening is that he came back to the girlfriend that had broken up with him multiple times. And this also ties into another point I want to make here. Like 3 or 4 times. And like he was trying to drive his life in a way that he thought was like totally for her. That meant even like almost getting fired from his job. Eventually he was fired, but that's how bad it was. He was so programmed in him. Eventually this gal actually ended up like cheating on him with another guy from her work, and then she actually got pregnant with that other guy. This gal was from Mexico. She had came to the U.S. when she was like in her late teens. He got like totally, obviously she didn't see much in him, and that's what happened. It didn't work out. And this was the kind of behavior that he exhibited nonstop. It was continuous throughout this whole time that he was with her, and it really never ended. And I still recall with this guy, it was like the third or fourth time after she had broken up, and he was going to go back another time. Well, this just went massively wrong, and then it was shortly after that she ended up being pregnant with this other guy. I just remember telling him I would just avoid this. This was like 4 or 5 years ago, but unfortunately, these like simp guys often think that, oh, I'll just continue going back, and it doesn't work out often. A high-value guy doesn't need to go back to these gals. A high-value guy wouldn't go back to a friend that mistreated them, that did such a thing. So why would you go back to a lady that did such a thing? It makes no sense. And this return behavior to females that treat you this way. It's the same thing I've mentioned before. If you go schedule a date, the person's 20 minutes late, more than 20 minutes late, probably a really terrible sign, and you probably should just move on, because this is just a sign of respect. It just simply means that the person doesn't really respect. And unfortunately, that's the overall narrative in the kind of society that we live in. In many countries in the world, it really boils down to that women don't respect men on a whole. And the guys that fall into the simp category even more so. These are guys with very little respect. How the whole system, unfortunately, also is designed. Some guys might think that one guy's much more of a simp. Unfortunately, many guys, I think, if you're paying into the tax base of your country, especially if you're from a Western country, if you own property, you have income tax, all these taxes, you're kind of already a simp to a degree. So it's not like you should always think that, oh, you're that much better than the other guy, because if you're paying all these taxes, this is actually where the government collects a lot of your money. This is where the women and all these single mothers and all these redistribution programs, this is where a lot of it comes from, are these programs, are these tax structures. So just keep that in mind. If you really want to avoid all of this, you have to be like, get yourself out of the U.S., or out of your home country, or maybe the U.S., and get a new passport and get rid of properties. And you don't need to do this, but if you really want to stay away from all that, that's what you would have to do. It's tough though. And of course, stick to DeFi, stick to Bitcoin. This kind of financial system is way better than having all of your money like in normal checking saving accounts of the US, Canada, any country of this nature. For many of us MGTOW guys, this is something that I think if we did start out as PUAs or MRAs, one of the things that kind of brought us over was the fact that if we look at how this whole PUA community is, it's kind of the same thing to a degree. And some of these guys don't realize that they are kind of placating to the same thing. Really, MGTOW is one of the only philosophies where you can stay away from this. For me, and I hope everyone like here, I don't give any validation, any attention on social media, Instagram, Facebook, any of these apps, any dating apps, anything. Even on the street often, I don't even look at women often. I think that's the best approach that someone can take. And yeah, I'm only one person, but more people like that will spread. The attention should be coming from the women to you, not vice versa. And that's really my opinion, that like it shouldn't be just this like, because most of these women won't reciprocate anyhow. They won't, I mean, when push comes to shove, they won't be interested in going on dates or in a relationship. So for me, I'm like, I don't really care anyhow. I just do my own thing and live on, and I don't give attention. This is a big thing that everyone here can do. Just don't give extra attention to these gals. Just ignore them. That's why I don't bring, some guys ask me here, why don't I talk about what gals think of MGTOW, this type of thing? Because I don't think a true MGTOW person isn't going to think about what a female thinks about MGTOW. It doesn't matter. Shouldn't for a true MGTOW person. But these are my feelings here. I look forward to everyone's feedback here, and thank you.